Something's about to happen that has never been done before in the history of spaceflight. And it could happen within weeks. SpaceX is going to try to catch a Starship out of the sky. Flight 13 is barely in the books, and it's already been confirmed that the next flight carries the attempt. But there is a significant problem to be solved before they can do that catch. So today, let's talk about why this one matters more than anything else this program has done so far. My name is Felix. Welcome to What About It? Let's dive right in. Starship updates. Let's start where we left off, because the most valuable thing out of Flight 13 wasn't the launch. It was what happened after the ship hit the water. Ship 40 came down so gently it didn't explode. It tipped over, settled onto its side, and floated there. Still intact, still transmitting telemetry. Dan Hewitt called it the softest splashdown they've ever had.
That is a first. That is the softest splashdown we have ever had with the Starship there in the Indian Ocean.
And a dream scenario for a team trying to get heat shield data. He wasn't exaggerating. For the first time ever, SpaceX got to look at a Starship heat shield after re-entry in daylight, up close, on a vehicle that was still in one piece. Not fragments, not a debris field, actual shield still attached to the actual ship. And for the first time, they could take their time with it. And what it showed was very encouraging. A few tiles missing along the engine skirt edge, some cracked tiles scattered around. The tiles under the aft flaps were largely gone, but the hull underneath was not damaged. No burn-through. The steel came through. Think about the data set. Orbital photographs of the shield from the Starlink cameras, telemetry from the load-sensing tiles through the hardest ascent they've ever flown, and then a physical vehicle floating in the ocean they can inspect directly. All from one flight. Recovery teams headed out towards Ship 40 directly. Whether SpaceX tows it home or leaves it, we don't know yet. But I'd love to see that ship standing at Starbase one day. Stand it up as a monument, SpaceX. You and the public deserve it. Now, here's the part that didn't go well. It matters a lot for what comes next. Booster 20 flew a clean ascent. Stage separation and the flip were good. The boost back burn worked, which is exactly what Flight 12 failed to do. That was the fix working. Then the landing burn started and the ignition pattern was wrong. Engines that should have lit didn't. Some that did light shut back down within seconds. The booster kept compensating, holding other engines on to make up the difference, and it came down inside its target zone, but far too fast. It hit hard. So that's 2 flights in a row where a version 3 booster couldn't complete a landing burn. And we now have the official word on why it happened the first time. The Flight 12 mishap investigation was formally closed on July 13th, and the FAA cleared SpaceX to fly. The findings named 2 causes: heat effects on engine components during ascent and incorrect engine alarm system settings. Heat effects on the engines during ascent. We do have a wonderful onboard view from Flight 13 showing the engines firing. This footage shows the booster engines pushing the stack up before most engines cutoff, or MECO. And there is something visible on those engines we haven't talked about yet. See those colored stripes? Those are very likely coated with different indicator materials. They change color when certain temperatures are reached. And the FAA investigation result tells us why. If Booster 19 had engine heat trouble during ascent on Flight 12, it is only logical to get more data on exactly that. And the stripes are in different spots as well. On the shield sitting on the hull, protecting the engine power heads, on plumbing bringing in fuel to the engines, on the autogenous pressurization lines feeding hot gas back up to the tanks. Those stripes are all over the place, and they all show discoloration. Is that a good sign? Likely not. SpaceX might need more shielding on those components if these temperatures prevent the engines from functioning on the way back down. Either active cooling integrated into the parts as on the Raptor 3 engines, or good old physical shielding. It's hard to say what the results of SpaceX's findings are, but it is clear now that they are investigating it. Now look at the second reason again. SpaceX stated incorrect engine alarm system settings. Using the right tool matters. You wouldn't launch a small satellite on a Starship any more than you'd fly a crewed moon mission on a little Electron. You match the payload to the rocket. That's basically what today's sponsor does, but for AI. Meet ChatLLM by Abacus AI. Instead of paying for separate multiple subscriptions and switching between platforms, ChatLLM by Abacus AI puts all the top AI models in one place. The latest from ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, XAI, DeepSeek, and more. I particularly like Root LLM. It automatically picks the best model for whatever you've asked, so you don't have to guess. ChatLLM by Abacus AI can also generate images and video. There's also a presentation builder that can help with research and professional creation. And its Deep Agent can take on larger tasks, from research to building websites, apps, and chatbots. The part that surprised me? It's just $10 a month, far less than stacking up separate tools. With ChatLLM, you automatically use the best tool for your needs. Check out Abacus AI using the link in the description and in the pinned comment and help What About It in return. Thanks. Some of what went wrong on Flight 12 wasn't broken hardware. It was the vehicle's own alarm thresholds set for conditions that didn't match what 33 engines actually do in flight. SpaceX retuned those alarms for Flight 13 along with hardware changes for relight reliability. So those fixes did get the boost back burn working, but they did not get the landing burn working. Which brings us back to the same conclusion I keep landing on. Raptor 3 relight reliability is the long pole in this program right now, and SpaceX isn't hiding from it. In their own Flight 13 material, they stated that additional reliability improvements are planned in upcoming versions of the Raptor engine. That is the company telling you in writing that the engine isn't finished yet. But here's the other side of it, and this one I love because we watched it happen. Back in January, the test tank B18.3 was pushed until it crumpled during its first can crusher test. That's what test articles are for. You break them on purpose to learn something. Booster 20 flew last Friday with a doubler welded over a seam weld just below the common dome on the quick disconnect side. A doubler is exactly what it sounds like. Extra material reinforcing a spot that needs it. And that spot is the exact same spot where B18.3 crumpled. That's the whole method in one piece of steel. Break a tank on the ground in January, find the weak seam, reinforce it, fly the fix 6 months later. We covered that can crusher test when it happened. Now we get to see where it went. Booster 20 also flew with additional steel shielding on its forward dome for hot staging, and Ship 40 carried a new pair of directional vents on the sides of its oxygen tank. One more result worth confirming, because we could only call it a plan last time. SpaceX has now confirmed contact with all 20 Starlink V3 satellites deployed on Flight 13. Every single one. Out of the payload bay, solar arrays and antennas extended, and they phoned home. They were never meant to stay up. They rode the same suborbital path as the ship and burned up about 20 minutes later. But the demonstration is complete. Starship deployed real working satellites for the first time, and all of them worked. Now to the reason this episode exists. Minutes after Ship 40 splashed down, Elon Musk confirmed that unless the mission data review turns up a problem, SpaceX will attempt to catch the ship with the tower on the next flight. The next flight. Flight 14, which is looking like next month. Not kidding, no Elon time here. So let me explain why this is the next massive milestone and not just another item on a checklist. SpaceX has already caught a booster. They did it on flights 5, 7, and 8 with boosters 12, 14, and 15. All V2. Then they reused the caught boosters twice. So you might reasonably ask, what's so different about catching the upper stage? Everything is different. A booster never really leaves the atmosphere. It goes up, it comes back, and it never gets even close to orbital velocity. The ship does. Ship 40 was traveling at more than 20 times the speed of sound when re-entry began. All of that energy has to become heat and be thrown away before the vehicle can be caught, and the only thing between the ship and destruction while that happens? It's the heat shield. That is why the shield has been the hardest problem in this program for years, and why every flight is loaded with tile experiments. And there is another very important difference. A ship returning to starbase doesn't come in over open water. It crosses the continental United States on the way home to Texas. So SpaceX needs more than a shield that survives. They need to prove before committing that this shield on this ship is good enough to fly over people. That is why Flight 13 carried 6 satellites with cameras to photograph the shield in space, and why tiles were painted white to stand in as markers. They're building a way to certify a ship as safe to come home. There's one more detail from Flight 13 that tells you exactly where we are heading. During re-entry, Ship 40 flew a dynamic banking maneuver. They call it the swoosh maneuver. That wasn't for show. It was flown to mimic the trajectory that future ships will use when they return to starbase. It does the swoosh to protect the pad and to commit to the catch as late as possible. Flight 13 was a rehearsal. If this works on Flight 14, the whole program changes shape. Full reusability stops being a promise and becomes a demonstrated capability. Remember the NASA numbers we covered a few weeks back, where one crewed moon landing needs at least 15 Starship flights just to fill an HLS Starship in orbit. That math only works if ships come home and fly again. Catching the booster proved SpaceX could do something remarkable. Catching the ship proves Starship is a paradigm shift. As much as Falcon 9 was when the first booster landed at Kennedy Space Center. So how close exactly is Flight 14? Good news, closer than you might think. Booster 21 and Ship 41 are both inside the megabase right now, being prepared for their static fires. Booster 21 finished cryogenic proof testing at Massey's last week, and Ship 41 has been through its own campaign as well. Both are through structural testing and heading for engines. That is the Flight 14 stack, assembled and moving. And behind them, it keeps going. The test tank S39.1 left Massey's over the weekend and headed back to the production site after its own test campaign. Booster 22 has received its fuel transfer tube. Ship 42's transfer tubes went into Megabay 2 last week. Right now, at Starbase, there is active stacking running all the way through Flight 15, and inside the Star Factory, likely up to Flight 20. That's not a company recovering from a rough landing burn. That is a production line that never stops. Over at Pad 1, the rebuild continues. SpaceX has moved the GSE bunker onto its foundation. It has also received its floors, on which SpaceX will soon install all the support equipment for the brand new Pad 1 rebuild. It'll be interesting to see if and what they might do differently compared to Pad 2. After all, 2 launches are in on that new architecture. They might already have improvements planned for Pad 1. The flame trench is now rapidly receiving its concrete floor. Once that is finished, we're already looking at a diverter lift and installation. Quick execution. An entire ocean of parts is sitting next to the site, neatly arranged and waiting for the next steps. SpaceX is moving fast, as always. These aerial images are essential for my reporting. If you're down at Starbase, make sure to pay our official partner, SPI Helicopters, a visit and book a flight. The same views our photographers get. It is unforgettable and worth every penny. Click the card or the link in the description. Help Y in return. Check it out today. Here's where we stand. Ship 40 gave SpaceX the cleanest heat shield data they've ever had. Booster 20 proved the boost back fix worked and proved the landing burn still needs work. The engines remain the hardest problem, and the vehicles for the next flight are already in the base. Flight 14 is close. It might see a first chip catch if SpaceX's Flight 13 telemetry doesn't show any surprises. I expect it to take flight toward the end of August, maybe even earlier. And when it flies, SpaceX intends to bring a Starship home and catch it out of the sky. Nobody has ever done that, and we are so ready for it. Yay, you've reached the middle of the video. You made it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching and liking the video. And if you're among the 40% who haven't subscribed yet, and there was at least one video you learned something new from, it would mean the world to me if you did. It's free, and it genuinely helps more people find my channel. Want to make my world even easier? There is only one place you'd rather be, the Y Members Club on Patreon and right here on YouTube. Click the card or the join button right here under the video. You are the reason we keep doing this. Thank you so much. You rock. Have a look at this satellite. It is parked in orbit, and everything looks normal. This satellite cost hundreds of millions to build and launch, and every single instrument on board still works perfectly. The cameras, the antennas, the electronics, everything is flawless, but now it's about to be thrown away. Destroyed, lost for good. But why? Because it ran out of gas. That's it. The one thing it can't do is refuel, so the moment its fuel tank runs dry, it gets nudged into a junkyard orbit and abandoned. Such a junk or graveyard orbit is a parking spot for dead satellites. In the case of geostationary satellites, and those are the ones we're talking about here, such a high-up junk orbit is needed. They are roughly 35,800 kilometers up, impossible to deorbit. From such an orbit, you don't bring them back down to burn up in the atmosphere when they reach the end of their life. If you want to, you would have to shorten their operational life even more. That's because dragging one all the way back down would take an enormous amount of fuel. So instead, before a satellite runs completely dry, operators spend its last drops of propellant pushing it up into an empty band a few hundred kilometers above the active belt. Once it has arrived, they switch it off. It coasts there, harmlessly, more or less forever. The whole point is to get these satellites out of the way. That geostationary belt is crowded and valuable, and every working satellite needs its own slot. Leaving a dead one drifting in the traffic lane is an obvious collision risk, so the graveyard is basically the orbital equivalent of towing a broken-down car off the motorway. Except in orbit, there is no roadside assistance. What if there was a way to change just that? What if we could just send up a space mechanic and a can of gas? This is the MRV. Let's have a look at why it might be the start of something genuinely big. MRV spells out Mission Robotic Vehicle. It's a spacecraft built by Space Logistics, which is part of Northrop Grumman. It went up on a Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral in Florida on Tuesday. I watched it. The MRV did not ride alone. It shared the ride with 3 smaller spacecraft called Mission Extension Pods. Meep. These are more than just an add-on to max out the available payload space. They might just be the cleverest part of all of this. I'll come back to them in a moment. Building the MRV was no solo effort either. The 2 robotic arms on the MRV were built by the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory and funded by a DARPA Defense Research Program. DARPA is the Pentagon's research agency, the same folks who helped birth the internet. So you've got a private company, the military, and government labs all involved in one spacecraft. Satellite sizes can be very diverse, anything from a shoebox to a bus. To give you a better sense of size, you can compare the 3-ton MRV to about the size and heft of a minivan you could park in your driveway. The 3 mission extension pods weigh about 400 kilograms each. Think of the weight of a grand piano. Nothing enormous, but not exactly tiny either. To get a better idea about the environment the new system will be working in, we need to talk about geostationary orbit. This is the zone above our planet where most of the big communication satellites live. It's a very valuable neighborhood. There are roughly 500 active satellites up there right now, and they're the ones beaming down your satellite TV, a lot of broadband, weather data, and military communications. Together, they serve billions of people. This is prime real estate. Now, here's the problem. A satellite in that orbit has to constantly make tiny nudges to hold its exact position. Little thruster puffs to fight the gentle tugs of the sun and moon. That takes fuel, and a satellite only launches with so much of it. And when the tank finally runs dry, the satellite can't hold its spot anymore. Then the operators do the only thing they can, they push it into that graveyard orbit and switch it off. Think about how wasteful that is. It's like scrapping a perfectly good car. The engine's fine, everything's working purely because the fuel gauge hit empty and there was no petrol station for 1,000 kilometers. So how do we change that? How do we rescue a satellite that's out of fuel? This is where those little 400-kilogram pods come in. Each mission extension pod is basically a strap-on jackpack. It's got its own thrusters and its own fuel. It doesn't refill the dying satellite's tank. Instead, it clamps on and does the position keeping for it. A surprisingly beautiful solution. The old satellite can keep pointing its antennas and doing its job, while the pod handles all the nudging. One pod can keep a satellite alive and working for up to 6 years longer, supporting up to 2,000 kilograms of mass. The pod can't attach itself. It needs hands like a space mechanic. And that is why the MRV exists. The MRV and the 3 pods separate from the rocket, then slowly climb on their own to geostationary orbit using solar electric propulsion. Quick explainer, because this is a lovely bit of engineering. Instead of burning fuel in big fiery bursts like a normal rocket, the spacecraft uses electricity from its solar panels to fling out charged particles. It's an incredibly efficient way to travel, but it's slow and gentle, so the trip takes months. With a steady thrust, it barely uses any propellant getting there. And once it is up there, the MRV does the actual mechanic work. It carefully flies right up to a customer's fuel-starved satellite. Then it reaches out with a robotic arm, grabs one of the pods, and bolts it onto the satellite. Jetpack attached, satellite saved. Then it moves on to the next job. And the MRV isn't a one and done. It's designed to keep working for years, ferrying and attaching up to 30 pods over its lifetime. So it is not a single rescue, it's a real robotic mechanic that stays on shift. Northrop has actually flown simpler versions of this idea before, called mission extension vehicles. These docked onto 2 satellites and pushed them around like tugboats. But those were basically just space tugs. They didn't have arms. This new one does, and arms change everything. Because arms mean it can grab things, attach things, and eventually repair and upgrade things, not just push. And there is one more detail, the part that hints at where this is all heading. The MRV also carries a standardized refueling port. It's not using it to pump fuel on this first mission, but building it in is a statement of intent. That is me speculating. But you don't design and fly a refueling interface unless the real goal is eventually to fill tanks back up directly, not just clip on jetpacks forever. So why should you care beyond cool robot fixes satellite? You should, because this cracks open a whole new kind of business in orbit. Right now, space hardware is still almost entirely disposable. You build a thing, you launch it, you use it until it dies, you abandon it. Kind of like rockets before reuse. A working servicing robot flips that on its head. Suddenly, satellites can be extended, repositioned, inspected, and maybe one day repaired and refueled. An actual economy is developing up there. One that is not just about launching hardware, but maintaining it. Keeping expensive machines alive longer instead of disposing of them also means fewer dead satellites cluttering orbit, which is a growing problem on its own. There is a strategic layer, too. The word is out that the US Space Force wants to become a paying customer once this thing is proven. That's interesting because the same arms that attach jetpacks can inspect, move, or tend to military satellites, and China is reported to be developing its own satellite servicing and space logistics capabilities. So the ability to reach out and physically do something to a satellite already in orbit, that is quietly becoming a capability nations want for reasons that go well beyond saving a TV satellite. Same technology, very different stakes. A robot mechanic sounds humble, but we can now physically service things in orbit is one of those shifts that ripples outward for years and decades. The MRV was launched successfully, but it still has a long way to go, quite literally. It still has to spend months climbing to its orbit. Once it's reached geostationary orbit, it has to pull off its party trick, sneaking up on another satellite and handling it carefully. All of that while being thousands of kilometers up with no one there to help if it goes wrong. That first successful catch is the moment this stops being a promising idea and becomes a real service, and that's still ahead of us. For 60 years, everything we sent to space was built to be thrown away. This is a serious attempt to change that, and if it works in the future, when a satellite runs low on fuel, somebody just sends a mechanic. I'll be watching for that first grab. What do you think? Is orbital servicing the future, or are we better off just building cheaper, more disposable satellites? Let me know in the comments below. And that's it for today. Smash that like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm, and this is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. Our all-time favorite Raptor engine design and countless others are there for you to explore. Click the card or the US or worldwide link in the description. History is being written in real time. If you want to catch the other historic stories from recent weeks, click the video on screen and continue the journey now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode.